Over the last few decades, I've had the opportunity to travel the world and speak to many people. And in the last number of years, I have noticed that there's been a shift. And the people who used to consider themselves religious are in many ways turning away from their religion. They say that, for example, in the United States alone, 3 million people stop attending church or their place of worship every year. And I'm sure that even after now the pandemic, we're going to see even less and more people have stopped attending church than ever before. And so the question is why? And why do people leave their traditional religious teachings, and why do they leave their traditions, and why do they stop believing? And there are many different reasons for it. For some, it is, and I've spoken to many different people, so it's based on some of the my conversations that I have. One major reason is because it seems like religion and Christianity and church or whatever religious affiliation you're part of is often out of step with science. In other words, it doesn't make sense, for example, that the earth was created in 6 days and the universe was created in 6 days. And the biblical story, to many people, just doesn't sit very well with what they now know about evolution and the universe. And then you have people who kind of stopped attending church because they feel like the church is not relevant to me anymore because it's a bunch of people there who are politically on one side of the fence, and they're so ingrained in that political side, it doesn't seem like they're able to understand how the world has changed and willing to progress with the rest of the world. So it seems like it's a throwback to a different time and different era, and for that particular reason, they have stopped attending church. And then for other people, they are disappointed because they've been going to church possibly for a long time, or maybe even if they just went periodically, maybe once a month or every few weeks or a few times a year, even then it seems like it feels like church is very controlling, very narrow-minded. It's about what we're against, who we're against, who doesn't fit in. It's a seemingly very much a narrative about us versus them. Either you are part of our group or you're out. You are condemned, and we talk about heaven and hell, and it seems like in order to go to heaven, you have to align your thoughts and believe the same way as our church does. And for some reason, that doesn't resonate very well either with many of us. So there are a number of different reasons why people leave church. And as I said, it could be political, it could be because of science, because of progress in the world. There are so many different reasons. But I think that the primary reason, above all else, is because people are struggling. People are struggling with fear, anxiety, worry, depression, and all these toxic emotions. And ultimately, you begin to ask yourself, why is it not working for me? If this is the truth, if this is so life-changing, if this is supposed to turn my life around, why is it that I'm still struggling in all these areas? Now, some people, they still pretend, and a lot of us who have been to a place of worship and been part of it for a very long time, we know that there is a certain language, there's a certain way we speak, and there is almost like we are pretending. We are not very vulnerable. We want the world to see how great we are, or how well we have achieved in our spirituality, in our faith, in our beliefs. But many people, if you actually will find them at home when they're all alone, are struggling very, very deeply. And at some point, these people say, I just had enough of church. It's not meeting my needs. I can go to a psychiatrist. I can go to a therapist. I can go to some other person and get more help than I get in church. So they begin to question what they believe. And then you have people who may never gone to church. And they tell me this, and I find this quite fascinating. They tell me, I like Jesus. There's something fascinating about this Jesus, but to be honest with you, I'm not fond of Christians. They are against homosexuality. And they mention all the things that they are against. And it seems like it doesn't make any sense. And so that is another issue that is often raised. So the question is this: for many of us, we come to this crossroads where we instinctively begin to ask ourselves, is church, is Christianity, is religion, and I'm not just referring to the Christian religion here, but that's the one that I'm most closely affiliated with myself, or I should say that I came out of, and therefore I speak a little more with intimate knowledge of it. But we all come to this crossroads where we say, is this for me? And I've discovered that there are almost 4 stages you go through, and those 4 stages are doubt, and the first one, as I said, is doubt, where you actually kind of ask yourself, is this really real? You read the stories, you read the Bible, or you read your ancient texts, and you wonder, did these things happen? Did Moses really part the Red Sea? And all this Noah's Ark, did all the animals fit into that one ark? Many of these questions people ask themselves, and if they begin to ask that question, it says, well, if I don't believe that, how can I trust anything is true? So the first stage is doubt, and often doubt is made in secret. You don't, especially if you're part of a community, if you're part of a religious community, you don't express those doubts necessarily to other people, because there's a sense of shaming and that takes place, that if you don't believe, there is something wrong with you, and why don't you believe? Just trust God, and don't question, don't doubt. So a lot of doubts begin in secret. And at some point, if they're allowed, and if you allow yourself to move far enough, you begin to lose faith altogether, and then you drop out of your church, you drop out of your place of worship, because it doesn't make any sense anymore. You kind of give up on your beliefs, and we call that deconstruction. In other words, the worldview, the paradigm, the way you have seen the world is now completely being erased. The way you were raised up as a child, now you kind of lost that. It's not who you are anymore. You have evolved, you have changed, and you drop it all. And then you come to the third stage, which is called reconstruction. And reconstruction is a very important stage, because at some point you say, well, I believe in science. I think science is something incredible. I believe in equality for all people. I don't believe, this, condemning people to hell, and they are calling them sinners and doing all these things because of, for example, homosexuality or abortion or some other one of the many issues that are often associated with religious beliefs. And so we come to that point, it says we were no longer part of it. We don't want to be part of that anymore. We see the world differently. But then there is still this kind of a longing to understand what this life is all about. We look for meaning in life. We look for our life to have some kind of purpose, and then we cannot help when we look up into the sky and see the stars, the incredible stars on a dark night. And then during the day, when you see the blue sky and you look up and you see the vastness of it all, and you begin to realize, and then science is telling you how huge the universe is, And you wonder, like, how did all this stuff happen? Where did all this stuff come from? How is this all possible? And then you kind of revert back again to the issue of God and what is God. But you don't see God like you did before. He's not upstairs somewhere. He's not sitting beyond some galaxies, because it doesn't make any sense to how you now come to see the world. So you kind of again begin to ask yourself, but if that's not God, maybe my picture of God is wrong. But is there a God? And if there is a God, is there some kind of benefit to knowing Him? Is there something there that can help me in my life to be free from all these toxic emotions, to be free from the guilt and the shame that I've struggled with, or all these other issues that we often go through? Is there something about this God that can help me? And is there something about this God that can cause more equality in this world? Because in all of us, we have a longing to see more equality, for people to, in different parts of the world, to enjoy the same benefits that we enjoy. I would hope at least most people feel that way. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people would feel that, yes, there are people in the world who are not as fortunate as we are, who are not as blessed as we are, who do not have what we have. But somehow or another there is this feeling that they also should have the same opportunity as we have. And so you have all these different thoughts, and you think about Jesus. There was something very majestic about Jesus, and so you have those thoughts. Or you may kind of look into other religious paths. Buddhism, there is something about Buddhism that intrigues you. Maybe it's a meditation or many other teachings within Buddhism that intrigues you, or Hinduism, or many of the other different religions that seem to kind of make sense in so many different levels. And through all of this, you are kind of looking just for something new to emerge, where you have a sense of harmony, feel a sense of harmony again, when you just feel like, my life has a meaning. There is something worth living for. And this is essentially what the path of love is about. We're about being part of that spiritual journey together, of moving together from that place of doubt. We were part of a tradition, maybe. I'm not suggesting that you leave your tradition. I'm not suggesting any form or fashion. If you love your church, stay in your church. If you love your synagogue, stay in your synagogue or temple or place of worship, whatever it is. I'm not suggesting for anybody to leave their faith. I'm suggesting that we can all go through this journey together of awakening to something that is perhaps beyond just a superficial mental concept of God, and awakening to something deeper within us, a presence, something that I call sacred presence, that permeates with love and peace and grace. So let me tell you my own story a little bit, because it may help you understand what Path of Love is all about. I should go back actually decades ago, I was an evangelist. Now, for those who come from the Christian faith, you know what I'm talking about. But an evangelist is someone that travels and speaks and tries to convert other people. Now, I was quite successful. I spoke to as many as 100,000 people in some parts of the world. I would travel to places like the Soviet Union or Russia, what we now know as Russia. Many of those in that Eastern Bloc, in many other countries within that Eastern Bloc. And then I traveled to places like India, and I have like huge crowds there as well. And people come from many different religions. They came to hear me speak. And then I would go to Africa, and I had huge crowds there. And in South America, I had great crowds. And then I go and speak in many large churches I've spoken in churches that literally had 250,000 people in them. I've spoken in churches that have 25,000. I've spoken to churches of many different sizes. I've spoken even to small churches with 2 or 3 people in them. So I've kind of covered everything in between. And I became a pastor. And I had churches, and that lasted for a while. And then I was a professor of a seminary. And then something happened in 2005 that, for many different reasons, we moved away from Canada and we moved here to California. And deep inside, I was dealing with a lot of hurts. I was dealing with a lot of guilt. I had shame and had this plethora of negative emotions that kind of surrounded me, or that I felt like this cloud over me. It's like this energy over me that wasn't very healthy. And so one day I, started having these cluster headaches. And now I look back, the reason why I had those cluster headaches is very simple, because my mind was so filled with these toxic emotions, and that ultimately can lead to all kinds of health issues. In my particular case, it led to these cluster headaches. And so I didn't know how to respond to that. I didn't know what to do and how to move on from that. And so what I did, because I was raised, as I said, in this Christian tradition, I was someone who was speaking around the world, I was speaking to thousands and tens of thousands of people. So I prayed. I prayed and prayed some more, and I spoke healing, because that's what I did. And as an evangelist, I would speak healing over people, and it was kind of one of those guys, like one of those healing evangelists. That's what I was. And so I did the same over me, but I didn't get any better. I got worse. And it has continued for a long period of time, and these cluster headaches became so severe that I felt like someone was sticking a knife in my eye, and I didn't even want to live. I thought I'd rather die than live like this. This is not fun. And I continue like that, and I have sometimes sleepless nights. And it will last sometimes from 45 minutes to 3 hours. And in the beginning, it was sort of like every second day or so, and then it became every day, and then it became several times a day. And I never forget, this is in 2006, I had a really severe case of these cluster headaches, and I woke up in the morning, I hadn't slept very much, I woke up in the morning and feeling this like cloud, this negative energy all around me. And I thought, what am I going to do about this? I don't want to live. I'd rather die than live like this. This is not life, to live like this. And so I'm walking down the stairs, and I had like this feeling inside just to meditate. Now you have to understand, I came from a very traditional Christian background where meditation was something that was frowned upon. It was something that you could not accept. That was an Eastern religious practice, and it wasn't for Christians. At least my brand of Christianity. And so I was scared of doing it. It kind of frightened me. But when you're really desperate and you're kind of looking for answers, well, then you do what you got to do. So I sat down in my car. I slumped into my chair in my car and closed my eyes. Didn't know how to meditate. And for just a few moments, I focused. I focused on this scene from the movie, The Passion of the Christ, and I focused on literally seeing Jesus. Now, you're going to say, this is going to be a religious story. Just stay with me, because I'm going to get to the end of this so that you understand. I'm not trying to convert you to a religion. I'm not trying to convert you to anything. I'm trying to help you understand something about the path of love and how the highest virtue and the way to live is through unconditional love. And unconditional love has no borders, has no barriers, has no limitations, is not restrictive to my faith, my beliefs, my political persuasion, my nation, my nationality, my ethnic group, my race, my gender, my sexuality. Is not limited to any of that. Unconditional love is inclusive of all. That's what makes it unconditional, right? So going back to the story, for a moment as I sat there in meditation, I just focused, my full attention was on one of the scenes where Jesus was beaten, and where they would literally, they had a whip of what do they call, a cat of nine tails, and they would whip Jesus, and these tails would hook into Jesus' body, and they kind of would pull off his skin. And when you pull off the skin or rip off the skin, it was this gory, bloody scene. And I'm reliving this. My attention is on that. And then my attention was turned to Jesus' eyes as he looked at me. And when he looked at me, he kind of looked inside of me. I felt like he was looking inside of me and saw everything in me. All the dirt, all the shame, all the guilt, all the depression, everything. But there, I kind of just felt this overwhelming sense of love. It's like, oh, I know everything about you. I still accept you. You're still accepted. You're still loved. And something happened inside of me. I just was overwhelmed with this sense of love, this presence, this incredible feeling of acceptance, approval. And as I said, unconditional, selfless love that was so inclusive, had no barriers, had no religious barriers, had none of that. And instantly, the pain disappeared, and I have never had cluster headache since. Now, I wish that was the end of the story. I shouldn't say I wish it was the end of the story, because I don't. But that was not the end of the story. I guess that's what I'm really trying to say. Because I still struggled. I still continue to struggle for a considerable amount of time. And didn't know exactly what to do. I struggled with these emotional and mental anxieties and all of that, and didn't know what to do, and felt like I was not qualified, and was beginning to have more doubts and questions. And I actually entered into a stage of a lot of doubt, a lot of questions. And I was afraid to have questions. I was afraid to doubt, because when you're raised in a very religious community, you're told, well, never doubt, just believe, just believe. And so I was afraid to doubt, but at the same time, I looked around and I was reminded of something that Jesus said, you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. And so it kind of told me that if you're not free, and when I mention freedom, I'm talking about freedom from all these toxic emotions and the things that are holding you back from living the kind of life you really want to live, and from happiness, from peace and joy, all those different qualities that somehow or another you're taught is part of this spiritual life you're supposed to have. And if you're not experiencing those things, well, and Jesus said you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. If you're not free, that means that you don't know something about the truth. You're missing something about the truth. Either that or Jesus is lying, right? Those are the only options, or at least Jesus, even if it's not lying, he's wrong. And so I asked myself that question. You shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. I'm not free. Most of the people who are part of my religion are not free. In fact, I didn't know anybody was free. All those great, well-known preachers, they're not free either. So what are we missing about the truth? And that was a great step, because when I asked myself that question, I gave myself permission to doubt. And you can never really believe anything unless you first doubt. And so I came to this point of doubting. I began to look at a lot of different things. And over a period of years, there was a deconstruction taking place, where a lot of the beliefs and the ways that I had seen the world, or I've seen the world through the lens of my religious beliefs, through the lens of my faith, and through my faith or through my beliefs. It wasn't necessarily because it was the right beliefs. It was as I saw the world through a certain lens. I think that's a better way to put it. I saw the world through a certain lens. And that lens was obviously filtered or that lens was obviously filtered by the traditions in which I was raised. And so now, all of that is just coming undone. I'm not seeing the world like that anymore. There was a deconstruction taking place. And then I came to this point, I'm free. I don't have to have this religion anymore. I don't have to believe, all of that. I just began to see the world very differently. And church wasn't very important. In fact, it came to, even though for a period of time I was a pastor, but then eventually I just said, I don't even want to be a pastor anymore because I feel like I'm not, this is not what I want to do. This is not my life. I kind of moved beyond that. And so church was no longer that important to me. And going to church was no longer important to me. And being part of a religious community was no longer important to me. All of that kind of went away. And here you kind of just enjoying life. It's nice, especially for someone who's been in ministry. Hey, my Sundays are open and free. Pretty good, right? And for someone like myself. And so that was great. But at some point, you still begin to ask yourself the question, as I alluded to earlier. Well, the universe is this incredible place. When I look at science and I think about the evolution and I think about everything that we really see in the world and how we see the world and all of that, there's got to be something more to it. There's got to be something that is deeper than what we just see. There's got to be this element, and then you begin to study quantum physics and you learn about how there's indivisible whole. You learn about the invisible realm. You learn about this cosmic consciousness that somehow or another, is the foundation of everything that we see. The creation, the formless is the cause of form, of ordinary matter, that which we are able to ascertain with our five senses. And so you have all those different things that are taking place. And what I began to notice within me, the more I delved into this, I recognized that there was emerging within me this sense of awareness of the divine. Through meditation, I meditated every day. And just for years now, I've been meditating every day. And I meditated on love and peace. I would just focus, and then I just meditate and focus on my breath. Or I would just meditate around a certain phrase. And often that phrase was something to do with God. In God we live and move and have our being, or God is above all, through all, in all. And I became aware of this transcending presence within me. I became aware of my truest and deepest self beyond thoughts. It was just pure awareness. A stillness within, without the noises of the brain and the egoic mind that tries to kind of hold you hostage to its way of thinking. You're just free. You're just aware. You're in this place of presence. And when I was in that place of stillness, when I was in that place of just awareness, just being aware, when my thoughts were no longer racing back and forth and with that problem and those things, I began to experience a deeper level of freedom. And I felt the connection with the divine reality. I felt the connection with all things, with people who are different than me, with even my trees outside my house. I felt the connection. There was something, there was life, there was energy, there was something that transcended, was so transcending beyond my own reality, that I began to awaken to this. It was an infinite presence, and it transformed my life. And this is essentially the reason why we started Path of Love. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm not here to do any of that. That's not my goal. My goal and our goal for Path of Love is to help you to remove all the things that are standing in your way from happiness, peace, and love. And also to facilitate acts of kindness and generosity and forgiveness to create a better world together where everyone will understand the inclusiveness of love. Now you say that's an ambitious task. Yes, it is. But it begins in each and every one of us. The more we can become aware of our truest and deepest self, I'm convinced the more we will experience freedom, and that ultimately will lead to this presence that we are, this ultimately I am. That is that which is beyond your thought, that which is beyond the egoic mind. Now that will begin to shine as a light. As Jesus said, you are the light of the world. He spoke to all people from every background, from every religious background. He said to them, you are the light of the world. When we all awaken to the presence, to consciousness, to this sense of aliveness within us beyond thought, we will begin to shine as light. And I believe that that has the capacity to transform the world. So if this rings true to you, I invite you to join me and join us on this Path of Love journey.